The check I wrote for $87,000 might as well have been written in my own blood. I stared at the number on my phone screen. My savings account balance now showing 3 digits instead of 6. All for a wedding where I wasn't even sure I'd be welcome. My daughter Emma's voice echoed in my head from our last phone call. Dad, I know things have been weird between us since the divorce, but this is my big day. Can you just try to be normal? Normal. As if watching your ex-wife parade around with the man who destroyed your family could ever feel normal. As if funding a celebration where Gerald Harper, the bastard who'd been sleeping with my wife for 2 years before she filed for divorce, would probably be sitting in the front row, could ever be normal. But Emma was my only child, my little girl who used to build pillow forts with me on Saturday mornings, who came to me with scraped knees and broken hearts. If paying for her dream wedding was what it took to rebuild our relationship, then I'd write every check with a smile. The Pine Lake Resort looked like something out of a fairy tale. Towering evergreens reflected in crystal clear water, while white silk drapes fluttered between ancient oak trees. Servers in crisp uniforms carried champagne flutes on silver trays, preparing for tomorrow's ceremony. I'd arrived a day early to handle last-minute details and maybe steal a quiet moment with Emma before the chaos began. "Mr. Davidson!" Rebecca, the wedding planner, rushed toward me with her tablet clutched against her chest. Her smile was bright but strained. "Thank goodness you're here. We have a few final items to review." I nodded, following her to a quiet corner of the pavilion. The late afternoon sun cast everything in golden light, making the whole scene look like a movie set, which in a way it was. A very expensive movie where I'd been relegated to a supporting role in my own daughter's life. "The final guest count is 127, Rebecca said, scrolling through her notes. "The catering is all set. Flowers are being delivered at 6 a.m., and the photographer will be here by 7 for pre-ceremony shots." She handed me a printed guest list. "I wanted you to review this one more time. There was a late addition that came through your ex-wife's side." My eyes scanned the familiar names until they stopped cold on line 43. G. Harper, +1. The paper trembled slightly in my hands. "When was this added?" "About 2 weeks ago. Mrs. Davidson, sorry, Mrs. Crawford now, said it was a family friend who absolutely couldn't miss the wedding. She handled the invitation personally." Family friend. Right. Gerald Harper was a lot of things, but family friend wasn't one of them. Unless you counted the kind of friendship that involved sneaking around hotel rooms and lying to everyone who mattered. "Is there a problem?" Rebecca asked, noticing my expression. Before I could answer, a familiar laugh drifted across the pavilion. My head snapped up, and there she was, Emma, radiant in a sundress, her dark hair catching the light as she gestured animatedly. She was talking to someone I couldn't see, someone blocked by one of the decorative pillars. Then the person stepped into view, and my stomach dropped like a stone. Gerald Harper hadn't changed much in the 3 years since the divorce was finalized. Still tall and lean, with that silver hair that made him look distinguished instead of old. Still wearing expensive suits that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. And still standing entirely too close to my daughter. Emma threw her arms around him in a hug that lasted several seconds too long. When she pulled back, her face was lit up with the kind of genuine joy I hadn't seen from her in years. Not since before the divorce. Not since before everything fell apart. "Dad!" Emma's voice carried across the pavilion as she spotted me. But her smile faltered for just a moment. A micro-expression that felt like a punch to the gut. Gerald's eyes met mine over her shoulder. He had the grace to look uncomfortable, at least. His hand dropped from Emma's shoulder, and he took a small step back. "Tom," he said with a nod as they approached. "Thank you for all of this." He gestured at the elaborate decorations around us. I wanted to tell him exactly what I thought of his gratitude. Instead, I forced a smile. "Emma deserves the best." "She certainly does," Gerald agreed. and something in his tone made me want to hit him. Emma looked between us, tension radiating from her like heat. Gerald was just telling me about the surprise he has planned for tomorrow. Surprise? I kept my voice level, but inside I was screaming. Gerald's smile was modest, but I could see the satisfaction in his eyes. Nothing too elaborate, just a little something during the father-daughter dance. Father-daughter dance. The words hit me like a physical blow. I thought that was our moment, Em? Emma's cheeks flushed. It is, Dad. But Gerald, he's been there for me too. Especially during college when… She trailed off, but I knew what she wasn't saying. When I was working 60-hour weeks trying to rebuild my life after the divorce. When I missed her graduation because of a work crisis. When I failed to show up in the ways that mattered most. We'll figure it out, she said quickly. There's room for everyone. Room for everyone. Except there wasn't, was there? Not really. In Emma's new version of family, Gerald had somehow earned a place that should have been mine alone. Rebecca cleared her throat diplomatically. Perhaps we should review the ceremony timeline? The processional starts at 4 p.m. sharp. As she launched into logistics, I found myself only half listening. My attention kept drifting to Gerald, who was checking his phone with the casual confidence of someone who belonged here, who had a right to be here, who wasn't paying for the privilege of watching his daughter get married. The father of the bride will escort Emma down the aisle, Rebecca continued, and I felt a small surge of relief. At least that tradition remained intact. Actually, Emma interrupted, we've made a small change to that. My blood turned to ice. Gerald is going to walk with us, she said, not quite meeting my eyes. Both of you will escort me down the aisle. The world tilted sideways. Both of us? Dad, please don't make this harder than it has to be. Gerald has been like a second father to me. He deserves to be part of this moment. Second father. The words echoed in my head like a death sentence. I'd spent the last 3 years trying to rebuild our relationship, trying to prove I could be the father she needed. And somehow, Gerald had slipped into that role without breaking a sweat. I think that's beautiful, Rebecca said with professional enthusiasm. A modern take on tradition. Modern. That was one way to put it. Another way was to call it exactly what it was. My complete and total humiliation, orchestrated by the man who'd already stolen my wife, and now wanted to steal my role as father of the bride. We should get going, Emma said, checking her watch. The rehearsal dinner starts in an hour, and I still need to change. She kissed my cheek, a perfunctory gesture that felt more like an obligation than affection, and headed toward the resort. Gerald started to follow, then paused beside me. I know this is awkward, he said quietly, but Emma asked me to be here. I'm just trying to support her. Support her. With my money, at my expense, in my place. But I just nodded, not trusting myself to speak without saying something I'd regret. Gerald walked away, leaving me alone with Rebecca, and the sound of my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. Mr. Davidson, are you all right? I looked at the wedding planner, this young woman who'd spent months helping me plan the perfect day for my daughter, who'd listened to my stories about Emma's childhood, who'd helped me choose flowers that matched her favorite colors, who'd worked overtime to make sure every detail was exactly right. I'm fine, I lied. Just a lot to take in. Rebecca's expression softened. For what it's worth, I think what you're doing is incredible. Not every father would be so generous after a difficult divorce. Generous. That was one word for it. Pathetic might be more accurate. The rehearsal dinner was held in the resort's main dining room, a rustic space with exposed beams and stone walls. Round tables draped in white linen filled the room, each one decorated with simple arrangements of wildflowers. It was elegant and understated, exactly what Emma had wanted. I sat at the head table between Emma and her fiancé Marcus, trying to look like I belonged there. Across from me, Gerald regaled the table with stories from Emma's college years. Stories I should have been part of. Stories that featured him instead of me. Remember when you called me crying because you thought you'd failed organic chemistry? Gerald asked Emma, who laughed and covered her face with her hands. I was such a mess, she said. But you drove 4 hours just to take me out for ice cream and tell me it would be okay. 4 hours. I'd been in the middle of a merger that week, fielding calls around the clock, completely unaware that my daughter was falling apart. By the time I found out about her grade struggles, the semester was over, and Gerald had already swooped in to save the day. Gerald has always been there when I needed him, Emma continued, raising her wine glass in his direction. Even when my own family couldn't be. The comment was clearly directed at me, but she didn't meet my eyes when she said it. Instead, she focused on Gerald, who looked appropriately humble while basking in the praise. I wanted to defend myself, to explain that I'd been working myself to death trying to provide for her, trying to pay for the college tuition and the apartment and the study abroad programs, to point out that someone had to earn the money that paid for all those ice cream trips and shoulder-to-cry-on moments. Instead, I raised my own glass. To Gerald, I said, my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest. Thank you for being there when I couldn't. The table erupted in appreciative murmurs. Gerald's smile was gracious, but I could see the triumph in his eyes. He'd won, and we both knew it. After dinner, I found myself wandering the resort grounds, trying to process what had just happened. The night air was cool against my skin, and the sound of laughter drifted from the main building where the younger guests were still celebrating. I ended up at the photo display Rebecca had set up near the entrance, a chronological journey through Emma's life that would greet wedding guests as they arrived. I'd provided dozens of pictures from her childhood, first steps, birthday parties, school plays, family vacations from before everything fell apart. But as I studied the display more carefully, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The photos from Emma's high school and college years featured Gerald prominently. Gerald at her graduation. Gerald at her college orientation. Gerald helping her move into her first apartment. And in the corner of several photos, I could see where someone had been carefully cropped out. A sleeve here, part of a shoulder there. The ghostly remains of my presence in my daughter's life. I pulled out my phone and compared it to a photo I'd taken at Emma's college graduation. In my version, I was standing next to her in my best suit, beaming with pride. In the display version, I'd been surgically removed, leaving just Gerald and Emma smiling at the camera. Dad! I turned to find Emma approaching cautiously, her wedding dress bag draped over her arm. What are you doing out here? I gestured at the photo display. Just looking at the memories. She followed my gaze and had the grace to look uncomfortable. Rebecca thought it would be nice to show different phases of my life. Different phases, I repeated. And which phase was I part of exactly? Emma's jaw tightened. Don't do this, not tonight. Do what? Ask why I've been erased from your life story. You erased yourself, she snapped. And there it was, the anger she'd been hiding behind polite smiles all evening. Do you know how many times I called you in college? How many times I needed you and you were too busy with work to answer? I was working to pay for your college, I said. Someone had to earn the money. Gerald made time for me, she interrupted. He didn't have to, but he did. He showed up when it mattered. Gerald. Always Gerald. The man who'd destroyed our family had somehow positioned himself as the hero of Emma's story, while I, the one who'd actually paid for her education, her apartment, her car, had been relegated to the role of absentee father. He showed up because he was sleeping with your mother, I said quietly. Emma's face went white. That was after the divorce. Was it? She stared at me, and I could see the moment when doubt crept into her eyes. The moment when she started questioning the timeline she'd been told. Dad, don't! Your mother filed for divorce in October. But Gerald's lease on his downtown apartment ended in June. Want to guess where he was living those 4 months? Emma's hands trembled as she clutched her dress bag tighter. Stop. He was there for you because he was already there, Em. In our house, in our bed, playing house with our family while I was working my ass off to keep us afloat. I don't want to hear this. I know you don't, but you need to understand why I wasn't around as much. I was trying to save our family while he was tearing it apart from the inside. Emma's eyes filled with tears, but they were angry tears, not sad ones. Even if that's true, it doesn't change the fact that you chose work over me. Over and over again. I chose to provide for you. You chose the easy way out, she shot back. It's easier to write checks than to actually show up. And now you're doing it again. Throwing money at my wedding like that makes up for 3 years of barely trying. The words hit like physical blows. I have tried. Have you? Or have you just been going through the motions, hoping money would fix everything? I opened my mouth to argue, but the words died in my throat. Because part of what she was saying was true. Writing the check for the wedding had felt like redemption, like proof that I was a good father. But maybe it was just the latest in a long line of financial gestures meant to substitute for actual presents. I love you, I said finally. Everything I've done has been because I love you. Emma's expression softened slightly. I know, Dad, but love isn't enough if you're not actually there to show it. She turned to go, then paused. Gerald isn't perfect, but he's been the closest thing to a stable father figure I've had since I was 15. I'm sorry that hurts you, but it's the truth. She walked away, leaving me alone with the photo display and the crushing weight of my own failures. I stared at the cropped images, at the careful editing that had removed me from my daughter's story, and realized that maybe I'd done the erasing myself. Maybe I'd been absent so often that when someone finally cropped me out of the pictures, no one even noticed I was gone. The wedding morning dawned clear and bright, with the kind of perfect weather that made you believe in fairy tales. I'd barely slept, replaying my conversation with Emma over and over, trying to figure out how everything had gone so wrong. I was in the resort's coffee shop, nursing my 3rd cup of the day, when Rebecca found me. Mr. Davidson? We need to discuss the photography schedule. She looked frazzled, her usually perfect composure showing cracks around the edges. What's the problem? Well, it's about the family photos. The photographer wants to do them before the ceremony, but there's some confusion about arrangements. I had a sinking feeling I knew what kind of confusion she meant. Gerald will be in the immediate family shots, she continued carefully. Your ex-wife requested that he be included in all photos with her and Emma. All photos, including the ones where I was supposed to be the father of the bride. And the processional photos. Rebecca's discomfort was visible. The photographer will capture both you and Gerald escorting Emma down the aisle. She wants to make sure both perspectives are covered. Both perspectives. As if there were 2 equally valid versions of who Emma's father was. I see. Mr. Davidson, I want you to know that this is unusual. Most weddings don't have these kinds of complications. Complications? That was a diplomatic way to describe the systematic replacement of the bride's actual father with her mother's boyfriend. It's fine, I lied. We'll make it work. But it wasn't fine. Nothing about this was fine. As I walked toward the bridal suite to see Emma before the ceremony, I felt like I was attending my own funeral. Present, but somehow already dead. Watching other people take my place in the story of my daughter's life. The bridal suite was chaos. Emma sat in front of a mirror while 3 women worked on her hair and makeup, her wedding dress hanging nearby like a white silk promise. She looked radiant, every inch the beautiful bride she'd dreamed of becoming. Dad! She smiled when she saw me, and for a moment, it felt like the old Emma, the one who used to run to me when I came home from work. What do you think? You look perfect, I said, and meant it. Your mom would be proud." The words slipped out before I could stop them. Emma's biological mother, my ex-wife's sister, had died when Emma was 2. I'd married Sarah when Emma was 3, and Sarah had been the only mother Emma really remembered. But in the stress of the moment, I'd reverted to the deeper truth. Emma was my daughter by blood, not just by marriage. "Thanks, Dad." Emma's eyes were soft. "I know yesterday was hard, but I'm glad you're here. Wouldn't miss it for the world." A knock at the door interrupted us, and Gerald's voice came through the wood. "Emma, sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to give you something before we head downstairs." Emma's face lit up. "Come in." Gerald entered carrying a small jewelry box, his face serious but warm. "This was my grandmother's," he said, opening the box to reveal a delicate pearl necklace. "She wore it on her wedding day, and so did my mother." "I'd be honored if you'd wear it today." Emma gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. "Gerald, I can't. This is too much." "Your family," he said simply. "It belongs with family." Family. There was that word again, cutting through me like a blade. Gerald had been in Emma's life for less than 5 years, but somehow he'd earned the right to call her family, to give her heirloom jewelry, to walk her down the aisle. Emma hugged him tightly, and I saw tears in her eyes. "Thank you. This means everything to me." I watched Gerald fasten the necklace around Emma's neck, his fingers gentle and sure. It was an intimate moment, the kind of father-daughter interaction I should have been part of. Instead, I was a spectator, holding back tears as another man claimed my role in my daughter's biggest moment. "Beautiful," Gerald said, stepping back to admire how the pearls looked against Emma's skin. "Perfect for a perfect bride." "Dad, what do you think?" Emma turned to me, her eyes bright with happiness. "It's lovely," I managed. "Very elegant." But inside, I was screaming. Gerald's family heirloom would be in every wedding photo, every memory of this day. Years from now, when Emma looked at her wedding pictures, she'd remember Gerald's grandmother's pearls. Not anything I'd given her. Because I hadn't given her anything, I'd paid for everything: the dress, the venue, the flowers, the photographer. But I hadn't given her anything personal, anything that said father instead of just bank account. "We should head downstairs," Gerald said, checking his watch. "The photographer wants to start with family photos in 15 minutes. Family photos. Right. The ones where Gerald would stand next to Emma like he belonged there, while I hovered awkwardly on the periphery of my own daughter's wedding. The photography session was a special kind of torture. The photographer, a cheerful woman named Karen, treated Gerald and me with careful equality, as if we were co-fathers sharing custody of the bride. She posed us in various combinations: Emma with me, Emma with Gerald, Emma with both of us, Emma with her mother and Gerald, Emma with her mother and me. But I could see the difference in Emma's expressions. With Gerald, she was relaxed, natural, genuinely happy. With me, she was slightly stiff, her smile a little forced. And in the group shots with both of us, she unconsciously leaned toward Gerald, as if he were her safe harbor in an uncomfortable situation. "Let's get a few with the two fathers," Karen said, apparently oblivious to how that phrase made me feel. Two fathers, as if fatherhood were something that could be shared, diluted, split between multiple people. As if 18 years of raising Emma from a baby meant the same thing as 5 years of swooping in to play hero. Gerald and I stood on either side of Emma, our hands on her shoulders, both smiling for the camera. But I could feel the tension in my jaw, the way my smile didn't quite reach my eyes. This wasn't how I'd imagined my daughter's wedding photos. In my dreams, it had been just the two of us, father and daughter, sharing the most important day of her life. "Perfect," Karen said, snapping away. "These are going to be beautiful." Beautiful. Sure, if you enjoyed looking at pictures of a man being systematically erased from his own family. After the photos, I escaped to the men's room to splash cold water on my face and try to regain my composure. The ceremony would start in 30 minutes, and I needed to get it together. This was Emma's day, not mine. My feelings didn't matter as long as she was happy. But as I stared at myself in the mirror, I barely recognized the man looking back. When had I become so pathetic? When had I started accepting humiliation as the price of staying in my daughter's life? The bathroom door opened and Gerald walked in. For a moment, we stood in awkward silence, two middle-aged men trying to avoid eye contact at adjacent sinks. "Tom," Gerald said finally, "I want you to know that I appreciate what you're doing here. Paying for all of this, sharing the spotlight. It can't be easy, sharing the spotlight, as if he had any right to a spotlight that should have been mine alone." "Emma deserves the perfect wedding," I said, my voice flat. "She does." Gerald dried his hands with a paper towel, then turned to face me. "And she deserves to have both of the men who've been important to her there to support her. Both of the men. Not her father and her stepfather, or her father and her mother's boyfriend. Both of the men, as if we were equals in Emma's life." "I know this is complicated," Gerald continued, "but Emma loves you. She needs you to be present. Really present, not just financially present." The audacity of it took my breath away. Here was the man who'd cheated with my wife, destroyed my marriage, and stolen my role in my daughter's life, giving me advice on how to be a better father. "I think you've done enough," I said quietly. Gerald's expression hardened slightly. "I've done what Emma needed when she needed it. That's what fathers do. You're not her father." "No," Gerald agreed, "but I've been acting like one for the past 5 years, which is more than I can say for you." The words hit like a physical blow, and I had to grip the sink to keep from lunging at him. Because the worst part was that he was right. I had been absent. I had chosen work over presence. I had failed to show up when it mattered most. But that didn't give him the right to take my place. "This conversation is over," I said. Gerald nodded. "Probably for the best. We both want Emma to be happy today. Let's focus on that." He left me alone in the bathroom, staring at my reflection and wondering how I'd become the villain in my own daughter's story. The ceremony was held on a wooden platform overlooking the lake, with white chairs arranged in perfect rows and an arch of flowers framing the altar. 127 guests filled the seats, all of them dressed in their finest clothes, all of them there to witness Emma's happiest moment. I stood in the back, waiting for my cue to walk Emma down the aisle. She looked absolutely stunning in her wedding dress, a vision in white silk and lace with Gerald's grandmother's pearls gleaming at her throat. Marcus waited at the altar in his black tuxedo, his face bright with love and anticipation. "Ready?" Gerald appeared beside me, straightening his tie. He looked confident, relaxed, like he'd done this a dozen times before. "Ready," I lied. Emma took my left arm and Gerald's right arm, and together we began the long walk down the aisle. Every eye in the place was on us, the bride and her two father figures, a modern family tableau that would have been heartwarming if it weren't built on the ruins of my actual family. Halfway down the aisle, Gerald subtly adjusted his position, moving slightly ahead of me so that he appeared to be leading the procession. To the wedding guests, it probably looked natural, like he was the primary father figure while I was just along for the ride. I wanted to push back, to reclaim my rightful position, but Emma's hand on my arm kept me in check. This was her moment, not mine. I couldn't ruin it just to salvage my own pride. When we reached the altar, the officiant smiled at all three of us. "Who gives this woman to be married?" Gerald and I answered in unison, "We do." But Gerald's voice was stronger, more confident. Mine cracked slightly, betraying the emotion I was trying to keep buried. The ceremony itself was beautiful. Emma and Marcus exchanged vows they'd written themselves, promising to love each other through whatever life might bring. Marcus's voice was strong and clear, while Emma's was soft but sure. They looked at each other like they were the only two people in the world. I should have been focused on their happiness, on the beautiful moment they were sharing. Instead, I kept thinking about Gerald's grandmother's pearls catching the light, about the family photos where I looked like an uncomfortable intruder, about the way Emma had naturally leaned toward him instead of me. During the ring exchange, I caught sight of Sarah, my ex-wife, in the front row. She was crying, but they were happy tears, the kind of tears a mother sheds when her daughter finds true love. Gerald's empty seat was next to hers, a place of honor reserved for the man who'd stolen my family. The officiant pronounced Emma and Marcus husband and wife, and they kissed as the crowd erupted in applause. Emma was radiant, practically glowing with joy, and for a moment my own pain was forgotten in the face of her happiness. This was what I'd paid for. This moment. This perfect day when my daughter's dreams came true. The receiving line after the ceremony was another exercise in shared fatherhood. Guests approached to congratulate Emma and Marcus, then turned to shake hands with both Gerald and me. Some people seemed confused about who was who, unsure which one of us was the real father. "Congratulations," said an elderly woman who I assumed was from Marcus's side. "You must be so proud of your daughter." She was looking at Gerald when she said it. "Thank you," Gerald replied graciously. "Emma's an amazing young woman." The woman nodded and moved on without acknowledging me at all. To her, Gerald was clearly the father of the bride, while I was just, what? A family friend? A financial backer? This happened several more times. Guests congratulating Gerald on Emma's wedding, complimenting him on raising such a wonderful daughter, asking him about his feelings on gaining a son-in-law. Each interaction was like a small death, a confirmation that I'd been successfully erased from the narrative of Emma's life. I was contemplating escape when a young man approached me separately from the main receiving line. He was probably in his mid-20s, with Gerald's strong jaw and piercing blue eyes. "Mr. Davidson," he said quietly, "I'm Jake Harper, Gerald's son." I shook his hand, confused. I didn't realize Gerald had children. Most people don't. Jake's smile was grim. "We're not exactly close. Haven't been since he left my mom for yours." The words hit me like a physical blow. "What?" Jake glanced around to make sure no one was listening, then stepped closer. "My parents divorced 6 years ago. Dad said it was because they'd grown apart, that it was nobody's fault. Mom believed him, right up until she found the credit card statements showing hotels and dinners with someone named Sarah, my ex-wife's name. 6 years ago would have been right in the middle of our marriage, 2 years before Sarah filed for divorce. "I don't understand," I said, though I was beginning to. "Dad's been cheating on his wives for as long as I can remember," Jake continued. "My mom wasn't his first victim, and Sarah won't be his last. But he's very good at making people believe he's the hero in every story." The world tilted sideways. Gerald hadn't just been having an affair with Sarah. He'd left his own family to be with her. He'd destroyed 2 marriages, not just one. "Why are you telling me this?" Jake's expression was hard. "Because I've been watching him play the devoted stepfather all day, and it's making me sick. He did the same thing to me when I was a kid, acted like the perfect dad when people were watching, then disappeared when it actually mattered. But Emma said he was there for her in college." "Oh, he shows up for the big moments," Jake agreed. "The graduation ceremonies, the award dinners, the photo opportunities. But where was he when she had the flu freshman year? When she got her heart broken sophomore year? When she was struggling with anxiety junior year?" I stared at him, pieces of a horrible puzzle clicking into place. "He swoops in for the highlights," Jake continued, "then disappears back to his own life. But somehow he gets credit for being the present parent, while the people doing the actual day-to-day work get forgotten." "How do you know about Emma's college struggles?" Jake's smile was sad. "Because she called me. We've been friends since our parents got together. She'd tell me about the panic attacks, the sleepless nights, the times she needed someone to talk to but couldn't reach either of her parents. I was the one who listened at 2 in the morning when she was falling apart. But Gerald was there for her graduation. For 4 hours, Jake interrupted. Long enough for photos and dinner. Then he drove back to his real life. But somehow, that 4-hour visit became the story of how he saved Emma's college experience. I felt sick. All this time, I'd been beating myself up for not being present enough, for choosing work over family. But Gerald, the man who'd been held up as the perfect father figure, had been even less present than I was. Why didn't Emma tell me any of this? Because she's protecting him, Jake said simply. She's protecting all of you. Emma's spent the last 5 years trying to hold together a family that was broken from the start. She's convinced herself that Gerald is the stable father figure she needs because the alternative is admitting that both of her fathers let her down. The truth hit me like a freight train. Emma hadn't chosen Gerald over me because he was better. She'd chosen him because he was easier. He demanded less, expected less, showed up just enough to seem present without actually being responsible for anything. I was the one who'd paid for her college, her apartment, her car. I was the one who'd worked overtime to afford her study abroad program. I was the one who'd sacrificed my social life, my hobbies, my own happiness to provide for her after the divorce. But Gerald was the one who got the credit because he'd perfected the art of showing up just enough to look good while doing none of the actual work. I should go, Jake said, glancing toward where Gerald was holding court with a group of wedding guests. But I wanted you to know the truth. Emma's a good kid, but she's been manipulated by an expert. Don't let him rewrite your story. Jake melted back into the crowd, leaving me standing alone with the devastating knowledge of what had really been happening all these years. I wasn't the absent father. I was the present father who'd been systematically erased by a master manipulator. The reception was held in the resort's grand ballroom, with round tables draped in white linen and centerpieces of white roses and baby's breath. The room buzzed with conversation and laughter as guests enjoyed cocktails and hors d'oeuvres before dinner. I found myself at the bar, nursing a whiskey and trying to process everything Jake had told me. Around me, wedding guests celebrated Emma's happiness, blissfully unaware of the dark undercurrents flowing beneath the surface of this perfect day. "Dad," Emma appeared beside me, looking concerned. "You seem quiet. Are you okay?" I looked at my daughter, beautiful, radiant, genuinely happy, and felt my heart break all over again. She had no idea what Gerald really was. In her mind, he was the stable father figure who'd stepped up when I'd failed. She had no idea that he was actually a serial manipulator who specialized in destroying families and rewriting history. "I'm fine," I said, "just taking it all in." Emma's expression softened. "I know today has been hard for you, all the logistics with Gerald. But I hope you know how much it means to me that you're here. Wouldn't miss it. And I hope you know that Gerald being here doesn't diminish what you mean to me. You're my dad. That will never change." The words should have been comforting, but they felt hollow. Because if I was really her dad, why was Gerald the one walking her down the aisle? Why was he the one giving her family heirlooms? Why was he the one everyone assumed was the father of the bride? "Emma," I said carefully, "can I ask you something?" "Of course." "When you were struggling in college, the anxiety, the panic attacks, who did you call?" Emma's face went pale. "How did you—" "Jake told me. Gerald's son. He said you two became friends." Emma looked around nervously, as if checking to make sure no one could overhear us. "Dad, this isn't the time." "It's exactly the time," I said gently. "Because I need to understand. You've spent years telling me that Gerald was there when I wasn't. But it sounds like when you really needed someone, you called Jake, not Gerald." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "It's complicated." "Uncomplicate it for me." She was quiet for a long moment, staring into her champagne glass. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Gerald is easy," she said. "He shows up when it's convenient, takes some pictures, tells everyone what a great stepdad he is, then disappears until the next big event. He doesn't ask hard questions or expect me to be anything other than perfect." "And me?" "You expect things," she said simply. "You expect me to call you back, to visit for holidays, to include you in my life. You want a real relationship, and that's scary." The truth hit me like a physical blow. Emma hadn't chosen Gerald because he was better. She'd chosen him because he was easier. He demanded nothing, while I demanded everything. "So you've been punishing me for caring too much?" Emma's tears spilled over. "I've been protecting myself from being disappointed again. After the divorce, when you were working all the time, I learned not to count on you. Gerald never made promises he couldn't keep because he never promised anything real. But I was working to provide for you." "I know," she interrupted. "I know that now. But I was 15, Dad. All I knew was that you weren't there when I needed you. And then, suddenly, Gerald was. Even if he wasn't really there either." We stood in silence for a moment, both of us crying now. "I'm sorry," Emma whispered. "I'm so sorry. I've been unfair to you, and I've let Gerald take credit for things he didn't do. But I didn't know how to fix it without admitting that I've been lying to myself for years." I pulled her into a hug, careful not to wrinkle her dress. "We can fix it," I said. "We can start over." "Can we?" Emma pulled back to look at me. "Because I don't know how to undo all of this. Gerald's already walking me down the aisle. He's in all the family photos. He's giving a speech during dinner. How do I take that back without ruining my own wedding?" Before I could answer, the wedding planner approached us. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but we need to start the processional into dinner. The father of the bride speech is scheduled right after the main course." Father of the bride speech. I'd completely forgotten about that tradition in all the chaos of the day. "Actually," I said, an idea forming in my mind, "I think there's been a misunderstanding. I'm the father of the bride. I'll be giving the speech." Rebecca looked confused. "But Mr. Harper told me he would be handling the toast." "Mr. Harper was mistaken," I said firmly. "It's my daughter, my wedding that I paid for, and my speech." Emma looked at me with wide eyes. "Dad, what are you planning?" "Nothing dramatic," I lied. "Just a father's words for his daughter on her wedding day." But as we walked into the dining room, my mind was racing. Gerald had spent years rewriting the story of Emma's life, positioning himself as the hero while casting me as the absent father. He'd manipulated my daughter, destroyed my family, and stolen my role in the most important moments. It was time to set the record straight. Dinner was a lavish affair. Filet mignon with roasted vegetables, followed by Emma's favorite chocolate cake. I barely tasted any of it, too focused on the speech I was mentally preparing. Around me, guests laughed and chatted, celebrating the happy couple, unaware that the evening was about to take a very different turn. Gerald sat at the head table next to Sarah, playing the role of proud stepfather with practiced ease. He regaled the nearby guests with stories about Emma's childhood, stories that conveniently featured him prominently while downplaying my role. "I remember when Emma got her first job," Gerald was saying. "She was so nervous about the interview. I spent hours with her, practicing questions and building her confidence. When she got the job, she called me first thing." The story was complete fiction. Emma's first job had been at a local bookstore when she was 16. I was the one who'd driven her to the interview, the one who'd helped her practice, the one she'd called when she got hired. Gerald hadn't even been in the picture yet. But the guests at the table were nodding along, impressed by Gerald's devoted parenting. And Emma wasn't correcting him. She was just sitting there, letting him steal credit for yet another moment that had belonged to us. "What a wonderful stepfather you are," gushed one of Marcus's aunts. Emma is so lucky to have you in her life." "I'm the lucky one," Gerald replied with false modesty. "Emma's like the daughter I never had." The daughter he never had. The words made my blood boil. Gerald had an actual daughter. Jake had mentioned a sister who'd cut contact with Gerald years ago after he'd abandoned their family. But here he was, claiming Emma as his own, while his real children wanted nothing to do with him. When the dinner plates were cleared, Rebecca stood up and tapped her wineglass with a spoon. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to invite the father of the bride to share a few words." I stood up before Gerald could react, my heart pounding, but my resolve steel firm. "Thank you, Rebecca." Gerald looked confused, then annoyed. He started to stand as well, but I was already walking toward the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, my voice carrying clearly through the room. "Thank you all for being here to celebrate Emma and Marcus on this beautiful day." The room quieted, all eyes on me. In the front row, I could see Emma watching me with a mixture of curiosity and concern. "When Emma was 3 years old," I continued, "she used to wake up every Saturday morning and climb into bed with me and her mom. We'd make pancakes together, and she'd tell me elaborate stories about her stuffed animals. Those Saturday mornings were some of the happiest moments of my life." I paused, letting the memory wash over me. Emma had an incredible imagination. She could turn a cardboard box into a spaceship, a blanket into a magic carpet, a stick into a magic wand. She saw wonder in everything, and she taught me to see it too. The room was completely silent now, everyone focused on my words. When Emma was 7, she decided she wanted to learn to ride a bike. I spent hours running behind her in the park, holding onto the seat, giving her confidence to pedal faster. When I finally let go and she kept riding, she turned around with the biggest smile I'd ever seen and shouted, "Daddy, I'm flying!" I could see Emma crying now, remembering. When Emma was 12, she broke her arm falling out of a tree in our backyard. I carried her to the car and held her hand all the way to the hospital. While we waited for the doctor, she looked up at me and said, "I'm sorry I scared you, Daddy." Even with a broken arm, she was worried about my feelings. The memories came flooding back. Hundreds of small moments that had made up our relationship. Bedtime stories and scraped knees and first days of school. Dance recitals and soccer games and parent-teacher conferences. All the ordinary moments that defined what it meant to be a father. When Emma was 15, her mother and I got divorced. It was the hardest thing I'd ever been through, and I know it was hard for Emma too. I made mistakes during that time. I worked too much, trying to rebuild my life and make sure I could still provide for the daughter I loved more than anything in the world. I looked directly at Emma. I wasn't there for every phone call. I missed some important moments. I let my pain over losing my family make me less present than I should have been. For that, I will always be sorry. Emma was sobbing now, but she was listening. But I want everyone here to know that Emma has never, not for one single day, been anything less than the center of my world. Every overtime hour I worked was for her college fund. Every sacrifice I made was to ensure she could have the life she deserved. Every dollar I've spent on this wedding was invested with joy, because Emma's happiness is worth everything to me. I turned to address the room at large. Some of you may be wondering why another man walked Emma down the aisle today alongside me. Let me explain. Gerald's face had gone pale. He was starting to realize where this was heading. 5 years ago, a man named Gerald Harper began dating Emma's mother. Gerald was charming, successful, and eager to play the role of stepfather. He attended Emma's graduation, took her out for the occasional dinner, and gradually positioned himself as a father figure in her life. The room was dead silent. You could hear a pin drop. What most of you don't know is that Gerald's relationship with Emma's mother began 2 years before my divorce was finalized. While I was working 60-hour weeks to pay our mortgage and Emma's school fees, Gerald was sleeping with my wife in our home. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Sarah's face had gone white. Gerald's own son, Jake, is here tonight. Jake, would you stand up, please? In the back of the room, Jake slowly rose to his feet, his face grim but determined. Jake's parents divorced 6 years ago because Gerald left his family for mine. Gerald has a pattern of destroying marriages and then rewriting history to make himself look like the hero. Gerald stood up abruptly. "That's enough! Sit down," I said sharply, and something in my voice made him comply. "You've had 5 years to tell your version of the story. Now it's my turn." I turned back to the microphone. Gerald has spent years convincing Emma that he was the present father while I was absent. He took credit for supporting her through college while I paid her tuition. He positioned himself as her emotional rock, while I was the one working overtime to afford her study abroad program. I looked directly at Gerald. But here's what Gerald doesn't know. 3 months ago, I hired a private investigator to look into his background. Would you like to know what we found? Gerald's face had gone from pale to green. Gerald Harper is currently under investigation by the SEC for securities fraud. He's been using his position at his investment firm to manipulate client portfolios for personal gain. The investigation began 8 months ago, and charges are expected to be filed within the next 6 weeks. More gasps from the crowd. Sarah looked like she was going to be sick. Gerald has also been married 4 times, not twice as he's claimed. 2 of those marriages ended because of his infidelity, and 1 ended because his wife discovered he'd been embezzling from her family's business. I pulled out my phone and connected it to the venue's sound system. Gerald's first wife provided me with some interesting information about his pattern of behavior, including these recorded phone calls from 2 years ago, where Gerald explains his strategy for replacing fathers in broken families. I pressed play, and Gerald's voice filled the room through the speakers. "The key is to show up for the big moments while the real dad is dealing with the messy day-to-day stuff," Gerald's voice said clearly. "Take some pictures, buy some gifts, play the hero. Kids remember emotion more than facts. So if you can be associated with the positive moments while the real father is associated with stress and obligations, you win." The recording continued. "I've done this 3 times now. Find a divorced woman with kids, swoop in during the transition period, and gradually replace the father in the children's minds. It's not about being a better parent, it's about better marketing." The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Gerald tried to stand again, but Jake was suddenly there, his hand firmly on his father's shoulder, keeping him in his seat. "The recording goes on," I said, "but I think you get the idea. Gerald Harper is a predator who targets broken families, not a devoted stepfather." I turned to Emma, who was staring at me with wide, horrified eyes. "Emma, I know this is shocking. I know it changes everything you thought you knew about the last 5 years. But I need you to understand something. You are my daughter, not his. You have always been my daughter, and you always will be." My voice broke slightly. "I failed you in some ways after the divorce. I let my own pain and my need to provide for you make me less emotionally present than I should have been. But I never, not for one moment, stopped loving you or stopped fighting for you." I looked around the room at the stunned faces of the wedding guests. This should have been a day of celebration, and I'm sorry that it's been contaminated by deception and manipulation, but I couldn't let Emma start her marriage built on a foundation of lies. I walked over to Emma, who was crying so hard she could barely breathe. "I love you," I said softly. "I have always loved you, and I will always be your father, no matter what anyone else tries to tell you." Emma stood up and threw her arms around me, sobbing against my chest. "I'm sorry, Daddy. I'm so sorry." "You have nothing to apologize for," I whispered. "You were manipulated by an expert. But it's over now." Behind us, chaos was erupting. Gerald was trying to leave, but Jake and several of Marcus's groomsmen were blocking his path. Sarah was in hysterics, alternately screaming at Gerald and trying to explain herself to anyone who would listen. Marcus appeared at Emma's side, his face pale but determined. "Emma, are you okay?" She pulled back from me and nodded, wiping her eyes. "I think so. I need a minute to process all of this." "Take all the time you need," Marcus said gently. Then he turned to me. "Thank you for telling the truth. Emma deserved to know." I nodded, grateful for his support. At least Emma had found a good man, one who would stand by her even when things got complicated. Security arrived to escort Gerald from the premises, but not before he tried one last desperate play. "Emma!" he called out as they led him toward the exit. "Don't believe him. He's just jealous because you chose me over him. I love you like my own daughter." Emma looked at him with disgust. "Get out," she said clearly, "and don't ever contact me again." Gerald's face crumpled, but he allowed security to lead him away. Sarah followed, still crying and trying to explain herself to anyone who would listen. The wedding reception was obviously over. Guests began filing out, some stopping to offer Emma and Marcus their support, others just eager to escape the drama. But a core group remained: Marcus's family, a few close friends, and Jake, who had become an unexpected ally. Emma and I sat together on the terrace overlooking the lake, watching the sun set over the water. The day that had started with such promise had ended in devastation, but somehow I felt lighter than I had in years. "I can't believe I fell for it," Emma said quietly. "All those years, I actually believed he cared about me." "He probably did care, in his own way," I said. "But he cared about himself more. People like Gerald are very good at mimicking genuine emotion." "How did you know? About the investigation and the recordings?" I smiled sadly. "When I decided to pay for your wedding, I wanted to make sure I understood everyone who would be in your life. The private investigator was supposed to just give me background on Marcus's family, but when I asked him to look into Gerald too, he found a lot." "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because I knew you wouldn't believe me unless you saw the evidence yourself, and I was afraid that if I tried to expose Gerald before your wedding, you'd think I was just being vindictive." Emma nodded slowly. "You were probably right. I was so invested in the narrative that Gerald was the good guy and you were the absent father. It was easier than admitting that I'd been protecting myself by keeping you at arm's length." "We both made mistakes," I said. "But we can start over now. No more lies, no more manipulation. Just us." Emma leaned against my shoulder. "I'd like that." Marcus joined us on the terrace carrying 3 glasses of wine. "I thought you might need these." "Thank you," Emma said, accepting a glass gratefully. "Marcus, I'm so sorry your wedding day got hijacked by family drama." Marcus sat down beside her and took her hand. "Emma, this wasn't just your wedding day. It was our wedding day. And I'd rather start our marriage with the truth than build it on lies. Your dad did the right thing." I felt a surge of gratitude toward my new son-in-law. Emma had chosen well. "So what happens now?" Emma asked. "Now we go home," I said. "We have some real conversations. We rebuild our relationship the right way this time. And we move forward." "What about Mom?" I sighed. "Your mother made her choices. She'll have to live with the consequences. Gerald's legal troubles are just beginning, and she's going to be caught up in them whether she likes it or not." Emma was quiet for a moment. "I feel like such an idiot." "You're not an idiot," I said firmly. "You're a victim. Gerald spent years manipulating you, making you doubt your own instincts and memories. That's not your fault. But I should have seen through it." "Emma." I turned to face her. "Gerald fooled 4 wives, countless colleagues, and probably hundreds of clients. He's a professional manipulator. The fact that he fooled you too doesn't make you stupid. It makes you human." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Jake joined us on the terrace. "How are you holding up?" he asked Emma. I'm okay, she said. Thank you for telling my dad the truth. I know it couldn't have been easy to expose your own father. Jake's expression was grim. Gerald stopped being my father a long time ago. What he became was something else entirely. What will you do now? I asked him. Testify at his trial, probably. Help the prosecutors build their case. Make sure he can't do this to anyone else. Jake looked at Emma. For what it's worth, I think you're lucky to have a father who fought for you. Most of Gerald's victims never get the truth. After Jake left, the three of us sat in comfortable silence, processing the events of the day. Emma's wedding hadn't gone according to plan, but in a strange way, it had given us something more valuable than a perfect ceremony. It had given us the truth. Dad? Emma said finally. Yeah? I love you. I should have said it more often. I love you too, sweetheart. More than you'll ever know. As we sat there together, father, daughter, and son-in-law, I realized that sometimes the best gift you can give someone isn't what they want, but what they need. Emma had wanted a fairy tale wedding with her perfect stepfather. What she'd needed was the truth about the man who'd been manipulating her for years. The wedding was ruined, but our relationship was finally free to begin again. 3 months later, I was in my new office when my assistant buzzed me. Mr. Davidson, there's a call for you. It's your daughter. Put her through. Dad. Emma's voice was bright, happier than I'd heard her since before the divorce. Hey, sweetheart. How are you and Marcus settling into married life? Really well, actually. That's part of why I'm calling. We've been talking, and we want to do something. What's that? We want to have another ceremony. A small one, just family and close friends. A real wedding where you're the only one walking me down the aisle. I felt tears prick my eyes. Emma, you don't need to do that. Yes, I do, she interrupted. Our first wedding was contaminated by Gerald's lies. I want to start our marriage with a ceremony that's about truth and love, not manipulation and deception. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything. Will you walk me down the aisle, Dad? Just you? It would be my honor. 6 months after the disaster at Pine Lake Resort, I stood at the back of a small chapel, watching Emma arrange her simple white dress. This time, there were only 20 people in attendance, our closest family and friends, people who truly loved Emma and wanted to celebrate her happiness. Marcus waited at the altar, his face glowing with love and anticipation. There was no photographer trying to pose us in awkward family groupings, no manipulative stepfather trying to steal the spotlight, just a daughter and her father, preparing to share a moment that belonged to us alone. Ready, Dad? Emma looked radiant in the simple chapel light. She'd chosen not to wear Gerald's grandmother's pearls this time. Instead, she wore a necklace I'd given her for her 16th birthday, a simple gold chain with a small heart pendant that had been her grandmother's. Ready, I said, offering her my arm. We walked down the aisle together, just the two of us, and for the first time in years, I felt like Emma's father again. Not her financial backer, not her guilty conscience, not her second choice, her father. When we reached the altar, the minister asked, "Who gives this woman to be married?" "I do," I said clearly, my voice strong and proud. "Her father." After the ceremony, we had a small reception at Marcus's family home. Real conversations, genuine laughter, people who actually cared about Emma's happiness rather than their own agenda. During the father-daughter dance, Emma looked up at me with tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For not giving up on me, for fighting for the truth even when it was hard, for being my real father. Thank you for giving me the chance to be one again." As we danced, I thought about Gerald, who was currently serving 18 months in federal prison for securities fraud. Sarah had divorced him 2 months after his sentencing, finally understanding the pattern of behavior that had destroyed so many lives. I thought about Emma's first wedding, with its elaborate decorations and hundreds of guests, and carefully orchestrated deceptions. And I thought about this second ceremony, small and simple and honest. Sometimes the best things come in smaller packages. Sometimes the truth is worth more than any lie, no matter how pretty. Sometimes love wins, even when it takes longer than you'd hoped. Emma and Marcus were truly married now, their union built on honesty rather than manipulation. And I was truly her father again, not because I'd paid for a wedding or competed with a fraud, but because I'd fought for the truth when it mattered most. As the evening wound down and the guests began to leave, Emma hugged me one more time. "I'm proud to be your daughter," she said. "And I'm proud to be your father." For the first time in 5 years, I actually meant it.